Hello, I am Cornelius.
And I'm Philip.
We're both partners at Anderson in Luxembourg. Welcome to the L3A Spring Conference on the chances and challenges of electronic signatures. Today, we have the pleasure to present to you in the first part our personal experience in our company, and in the second part, we will be joined by two industry specialists, fund manager as well as a representative from the bank, to tell us and talk to us about their experiences. Thank you very much for joining the conference.
Thank you, Cornelius. As Cornelius already said, we are Anderson and Paddock. Quickly showing you a quick slide. We have a classic fiduciary business and also international tax advisory business in Luxembourg. Anderson is thereby rendering tax advisory businesses throughout the whole chain of questions that you could have on an international scale, whereas Paddock is the classic fiduciary, accompanying our clients from domiciliation until to liquidation, which I think gives us the right to talk about electronic signatures, because that was one of the main projects pre-corona, but even more in corona. The approach that we had to electronic signatures, where we obviously assessed already prior to corona the volume and or the number of signatures that we have in our usual day-to-day business, and we came to the conclusion that we have more or less 7,500 documents per year that need to be signed, and on which document or on which signatures needs to be collected. We are working in a classic setup where we have juniors, seniors, managers up to the partner assigned on each client, whereas the juniors often follow up on the signatures with the clients where they need to run after the documents and collect it. One thing that we already identified while looking at the processes was that there was actually no centralized system for the follow-up on these signatures, which created problems.
Exactly. I mean, the traditional signature process requires a strict organization. It needs to provide for the backups in the different teams. You need to have a very efficient system of reminders because signatures are outstanding. It is an entire process that needs to be managed. And as Philip just mentioned, COVID accelerated the need to have this process centralized, to have it automated. We experienced the fact that wet ink processes, as they were known traditionally, were not longer available. We didn't have access to the office, to the printers, to papers, to scanners. I think all of that outlined where we needed to focus on when looking at electronic signatures.
Thank you, Cornelius. Yes.
So, Philip, what, according to you, were the chances that were presented when we as an organization started to look at the implementation of electronic signatures?
Yeah, looking at the number of number of documents that needed to be signed per year, we obviously were looking also at the costs of each electronic signature, or how multiple providers call it, envelopes, which is a number of documents that need to be signed electronically. First of all, the average cost of an electronic signature is between 6 and 10 euro, depending on the volume of signatures that you are using. This is for the simplified signatures, so without ID verification, which is sufficient for most of the signatures that we have here in Luxembourg and that we need to go or run for our clients. Here you can, basically we assessed on the number of signatures that we are needed, that the average cost of a signature was between 6 and 10 euro, which equals the average time, average opportunity cost of 3 minutes of a junior.
Yeah, I think what we experienced as being important and being an opportunity was the fact that we could start automating the processes. We were trying to improve through the use of digitalized storage, the ability to access online the different documents and the different processes that we were looking at. We mentioned earlier the fact that juniors were mainly in charge of working through the signatures, through the whole process. It allowed the managers of the teams to have access to all ongoing and archived signature processes. So the response time to clients, I think, was extremely well and extremely good. And I think it's fair to say that today we have about 85% of our corporate clients who are using electronic signatures with us. Would you agree?
That is more or less true, yes. Again, you can see already here, and I think that is one of the big chances that even minor operations like processes would outweigh the costs of electronic signatures. That is our experience. So, for example, if only one, if the junior would need to send only one reminder, and that is now automated, you have already won by the number or by using electronic signatures. But all this, sorry, go ahead.
No,
all this didn't went without challenge, obviously.
Exactly, that was my next question, to see where did you see the challenges in the process, but also in the organization?
Yeah, I'll come to that now. Obviously, such a big process is need to be led by someone. We are way too small. We have only 50 people in Luxembourg. We are way too small to have a project manager sitting around in the corner and waiting for one-time projects, especially like big as this one. So we needed to find an internal project manager taking care of the DocuSign process. And yeah, we needed to not only assign this person, but also create time for him or her to support the process next to its normal business. Ultimately, we found someone who is in the heart of our organization, who is in the secretarial team, basically responsible already today for filing and capturing signatures, following up on signature processes, who has really a good knowledge on all processes and through the different departments that we're currently serving.
So, do you think it's a good moment to talk about the best practices that we need to put in place? You just mentioned it. It is important to assign a team that is dedicating its time to the proper project management. You need to assess the processes and eventually also estimate the number of signatures that are needed. You mentioned the number 7,500 documents that need to be signed per year. Every document has at least one signature on it, so you can imagine that there's even more signatures required. And what we figured out and what we discovered in the whole process is that it is probably best to start slowly, maybe have 25 to 50% of the estimated volume launched before you really go into full scope and full execution of your project. Which also means that you can't do it from one day to the other. It needs to be planned, it needs to be anticipated, you need to have some midterm planning in it. Obviously with the pandemic outbreak we were forced to accelerate a little bit, but if you have the chance to do it properly, I think it is important to start slowly with it.
Yeah. One part, again, that is one of the challenges that I mentioned on the slide earlier, it's the training of the team. Obviously, there was a lot of reluctancy in the team that to adhere to these new processes, and it's important to onboard them quite early in the process, to give them training, because to make them understand that it has actually efficiencies rather than being a burden. And I think that's the conclusion. Like you need to consider electronic signatures only in cases where it is really bringing an efficiency and not is felt to be a burden.
Would you agree that onboarding your clients from the very beginning on is important?
Yeah, absolutely. Good. That would be one thing.
So it's a true team effort.
Like in the whole process, it would act like it would, affect the whole value chain from the process start until the very end.
Thank you very much, Philip.
Thank you very much, Cornelius.
And thank you very much to the audience. We hope you enjoyed the presentation, and we're now pleased to hand over to the second part, which is the panel with our two external participants. Welcome to the second part of our conference. We are pleased now to welcome Matthias Baumann, COO and Managing Partner of Blue Future Partners, an asset manager located in Munich, focusing on venture capital and particularly on fund of funds for venture capital, who has been so kind to join us to this conference to speak to us about his experience and the challenges on electronic signatures.
And we also welcome Alexis Gumbrich. He's Head of Control, Governance and Regulatory from State Street Bank. And he also does not carry that as an official title, but he's also Director for Business Continuity, which gives a special flavor to this conversation, as he is responsible to also keep up the business during the COVID crisis.
Thank you, Philip. So the first question goes out to Matthias, where we would be very interested to hear from you what is, according to your view, the main purpose of electronic signatures.
Yes, thank you, Cornelius. So from our side, I mean, as you might know, that our business is very international. So we are investing in different assets all over the world, and we also have limited partners from all over the world. So for us, it's very important to be as efficient as possible. And as you can imagine, in the past, when you had to send out a lot of envelopes with letters to be signed by LPs and to the funds, it took us a lot of time. So time efficiency is maybe one thing that was most important for us. And of course, the digitalization of the most important business processes and minimizing the barriers for signees in different territories, as said, and hopefully going paperless someday and being able to sign everywhere. Well, maybe these are the most important use cases or the most important facts that why we are using digital signatures.
I would ask the same question to Alexis, probably from a different angle. Obviously, is time efficiency also for you one of the most important aspects of electronic signatures, within internal or externally?
Thank you, Philip. Yes, indeed. I mean, of course. I mean, we all want to be digital. We want to be paperless. We want to qualify for ESG. And of course, the ultimate goal is that we want to be more efficient. So in that context, that e-signature has been a topic on the table for several years already. And I would say that the main change with COVID is that COVID forced us to move quicker. I mean, it's not a topic anymore. Last year, in March, from 1 week to the next, we had to move from having discussions around electronic signatures to implementing electronic signatures. So, of course, in the current situation, it's not a solution for every single piece of documentation or signature, but at least we had to move. So now the goal is to keep the momentum and be able to extend this to a wider range of use, I would say.
Thank you. That you touch a very interesting point there. Could you point out probably areas in your business where wet ink signature would still be preferred over electronic signatures?
Thank you, Philip. Indeed, I mean, for the moment, of course, from one day to the next, everything that is internal documentation, I would say a memo, a reconciliation that you have to sign off, service legal agreements between entities within the group, all that kind of documents that used to be signed in wet ink and shared. Sometimes, it was a bit inconsistent because you would sign with wet ink, but you would share electronically scanning. So not always consistent in the approach. But all these, we now fully accept electronic signature on these. Of course, when it comes to contractual documentation involving external parties, it's not only internally that we may not accept, but also externally. I mean, you need to have both parties agree that you could use electronic signatures. Then if documents need to go to a notary, the notary will need to agree as well. So again, and that's why we have to work together to find solutions that we can leverage all of us for the future, for greater, wider use of electronic signature.
Matthias, Alexis just touched a very important point, is the externalization, the interaction between two parties that are not part of the same organization in using wet ink or electronic signatures going forward. You and I, we have had in the past a lot of exchange on the challenges that this brings along. What is, from your experience, the most challenging area where one party prefers to have the electronic signature and the other party either is not able to deliver the electronic signature or is just refusing the delivery of the electronic signature?
Yes, thank you. Very good question. So it depends on a little bit of which counterparties we are talking, I guess. So for example, talking to our LPs or also to our team internally, I first had to explain them what a digital signature really is, because they thought it's just something like signing on paper, making a photograph and sending it, which is just very different from actually a qualified electronic signature. And for the other part, for example, talking to banks, very often they are just relying to their kind of internal policies. So they just tell us, oh, sorry, we are not able to accept electronic signatures because that's our internal policy. And the interesting thing that during COVID-19, for example, was that then when the first lockdown came, they said, okay, because now we have a lockdown, you can send us electronic signed documents. And then I was very happy that this made it more efficient for us. But after the first lockdown, then I sent them electronic documents again, and then they said, "Oh no, we cannot accept it any longer." So the question is, was it more insecure than during the pandemic or not? So it's a little bit inconsistent how it works for some of the counterparties, right?
Do you think that pushing everyone to work with electronic signatures is an argument to expand your business? To make it easier to do business?
Well, for some reasons, yes, because, in the field of venture capital, there are limited partners who say, okay, if it's too complicated to join your fund, then I will something else where I can spend my money. So they are not so dependent that they definitely would need to do this. So, for example, if we are talking to Asian limited partners, to potential co-investors, so for them it's absolutely normal to sign only digitally, and they really would accept it. So I don't know if it really is making it so much easier for us to develop our business, but it makes it easier, of course, yes.
I think in the long run, the cost efficiency with electronic signatures could also be passed on to the clients to a certain extent, because especially in the fund business, they look at the total expense ratios. Obviously, administrative costs are one part of the story. I think for Alexis, it's the same thing in the banking industry, whereas I would say that these cost efficiencies could be potentially at least compensate the increased administrative burden that the banks currently face. Would you agree to that?
Yes, thank you, Philippe. I mean, very good question, very good point. I mean, and again, that's something that COVID helped us with a lot. I mean, on top of electronic signature, we've been talking about paperless environment for years, and this way before we started around electronic signature, we started to talk about paperless. We tried this for years and years without success. With COVID, I mean, again, within a couple of weeks, we sent everybody home. We stopped printing documents. Those who are working from home have no capacity at all to print for corporate information security reasons. You cannot print from home. You cannot send documentation to your own, to a personal email address to print from your personal printer, of course, for the same reasons. So all that helped a lot. And today we are in a paperless, maybe not paper-free, but nearly. And that evidently helps a lot reducing the costs. And of course, that's all part of the efforts that we all have to make, year after year, in order to reduce the costs, allow our clients to reduce the charges, as you mentioned, on the fund, because that's a long-term trend. I mean, that's not something that's going to end anytime soon. So we have to keep up the effort in that regards.
But it's great to hear that you're already almost there, or going paperless, or almost being paperless. How would you, could you share from us, or with us probably, a story, what was the most challenging part to get to that point that you are today?
Clearly, Philippe, I would say it's a cultural point. I mean, when in the past we were going to meetings, everybody was coming to a meeting with his or her her own copy of the documentation for the discussion. I mean, today we are having virtual meetings, so we don't need that. We have laptops, or you have your desktop, and you can have the documentation on the screen while you speak. I mean, we are distributing more and more laptops to the staff, of course. So even when we come back to the premises, we can go to a meeting with the laptop and don't need any hard copies of documentation. So that's something, again, it was very hard culturally to change people's attitude, but it was driven by the COVID situation. We had no way out of it, and it's working perfectly. That's what drove adoption by everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe jumping a little bit from your personal experience, did you have any interaction with regulators or legislators with regards to the use of electronic signatures and the, let's say, the viability of your internal processes as you moved along?
Thank you, Cornelius. Not personally, but we have a working group at the bank on this, with legal, with compliance, risk, and they are definitely interacting with the regulator. They are definitely looking at the CSSF direction coming from the EU regulation on the topic. So, I mean, the point is to be able to benefit from a Luxembourg authenticated solution that we could use. Really, again, now we're talking about legal documentation that today must be signed in wet ink. So how could we implement electronic signature on those? And that's really the next level. That's where we want to be in the near future, but we're not there yet.
Giving back the question, or like the word probably to Matthias, like obviously you are already using electronic signatures within your processes, and one of the questions that came to us from the audience prior to this session was whether you actually as a company do your own license for electronic signature, or whether you rely on the licenses that your service providers use, having obviously the disadvantages that you might need to work with different systems.
So we have our own license from the beginning on, because actually it was, I guess, about 3 years ago, we didn't even think that, for example, a fund administrator or somebody like this could offer us the possibility for electronic signatures. And I guess from my personal view, I would be a little bit scared if all the documents are only lying at different counterparties or different service providers where I don't control the access for these important documents. Because if we would now change the service provider, whatever that means, we would still have all the documents in our safe environment of the electronic signature service we chose, and it also gives us more flexibility because we can easily add employees from the team to use it, or we can give our service provider, our fund administrator, limited access to use it for our needs, and then we would all the time be in control of the whole electronic signature environment.
That's a very interesting and very important point. So thank you for sharing that experience. But did you experience any limitations in the way of using electronic signatures the way that you have been using them?
Well, I mean, only in the meaning of acceptance from counterparties, and once again, there are these two sides. Either they say, okay, regarding our internal policies, we cannot accept it, or maybe some users didn't understand what it's meaning. So, for example, we had limited partners which then received the link to sign and then printed it out and sent it back via envelope because they thought it's the way like it's working. And then we said, okay, you already printed it out and you signed it on paper, but you can scan it and upload it to the electronic signature platform again. And the second time, then they already realized, okay, I don't have to print it out at all. So it needs some time, of course, for all the people who should be using it to understand how the processes work.
Alexis, a question to you maybe, and you mentioned yourself that you're part of a working group internally that is looking at electronic signatures. overall question that we are getting as feedback from using it is, how sure can you be that when it is accepted by one regulator, it will also be accepted by another regulator? Is there anything ongoing that is trying to harmonize it, or is there active communication with different regulators and legislators to maybe not harmonize the platform in itself, but the principles behind it?
Thank you, Cornelius. I mean, that's a very important question, and that's something that we're having a look at now. I mean, in Europe, I mean, we all depend on the European regulation on the matter, but then we're relying on different solutions, and that's the problem. We need to build the trust, and we need to be able to share solutions that we all rely upon. I mean, at State Street, we're part of a global organization, of course, and it would be pointless coming with a local solution that we could implement with our clients locally, but that our corporation would not accept. So we need to ensure that we can have a wide solution that we can share with the US, with the UK, with our clients across the globe, in order that we can make this efficient and that everybody has the same trust in electronic signature. Otherwise, we will not get there. So we do not really have interactions with the different regulators in a coordinated manner, but that's really what we would need in the near future.
Alexei, could you probably describe which processes you're currently using electronic signatures for? So are these external processes with your clients, or with also internal processes?
Yeah, no, for now it's only for internal processes. So we did not leverage any of the approved solution in Luxembourg, for instance. So we only use this for internal documentation. That's what I alluded to earlier on. I mean, service level agreements, intra-group, memos, reconciliation. So we don't use this for signature of documents that go out for contractual relationships, for instance.
And in the perspective of electronic signatures being, like always needed to be helpful, never be a burden, do you see already any measurable improvement in the areas that you wanted to improve through the electronic signatures, except of having far less paper?
Yes, I mean, it's not just being paperless. I mean, it's being much more efficient. I mean, when you receive a document, you want to review it, you want to add your signature to it. It's much more convenient than having to print a copy, sign it, scan it, send it back. I mean, the whole process was kind of a nonsense, while it's been streamlined a lot with the adoption of electronic signature, even if the scale and the scope is still very, very limited. That's been a great progress.
Thank you. It's probably worth asking the same question to Mr. Baumann, who's actually like from the more locally probably than you are as an international company from State Street Bank. So he's probably a little bit more flexible and can go a little bit further with using electronic signatures. Matthias, would you be able to share with us which processes you already digitalized so far? Is that most often external, like you were describing it, explaining your clients where they need to sign, or does it also concern already internal processes where you use electronic signatures, like compliance memos or board meetings?
Yeah, absolutely. So internal, external. Actually, we are using or try to use it for all kind of signatures. I mean, all kind of contracts or forms or due diligence processes. We also are using it for example, the invoicing workflow in the company, or we also were using it for working contracts, even if that's maybe still a little bit kind of gray zone, because actually you're required to have it in paper, a working contract, but you can nevertheless, you can, for example, use it to let somebody sign before he sends in the paper version, yeah, so that you already have a kind of commitment from the person. So it's useful for this as well. And I mean, as said, as we have a very international base of limited partners, for example, in the past when we needed a shareholder resolution from maybe 30 limited partners, this took us 4 weeks to get all the signatures. Now now we have it within maybe 48 hours because people are now used to the system and they keep getting reminders via email, and then they just sign it and we are ready to go.
Are you not afraid that electronic signatures may be subject to fraud? And through that also question the whole process behind it?
Yes. So, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm afraid of it because, I mean, for our business, we know people very well. And I mean, if the inbox of somebody, the email inbox would get hijacked and somebody would sign who didn't want to sign the contract, actually, I mean, the risk is very low, but it's possible. And I guess there's still way for improvement. Maybe as Alexis already mentioned, that we need kind of international standards, processes also for identification, ID identification or whatever. And I mean, there are a lot of technologies which could be used for that, like, for example, the blockchain. I mean, this could be a picture perfect way in making absolutely sure that the signature is true and valid. And I guess there's still a lot of way to improve that. It one day it's very normal that you are having a kind of virtual ID or passport where you then could sign signatures which together with any counterparty in the world, or regardless what kind of business or contract it is.
Okay, Alexis, fraud is a big topic within banks. We have seen that in the past, several attempts. Everybody, I think, has been exposed to the actual actions of criminals. So you must be very, very sensible on that topic. What is your view on that one?
Thank you, Cornelius. I mean, indeed, I mean, fraud and cybersecurity is one of our most important concerns for the moment. Now, what my view is on this is that I hope electronic signature would bring us more security than risk. I mean, I'm not sure it's not easier to forge a signature and send a fax than to hijack IT security, what IT CIS are putting into place to make our environment secure. So I hope, and that's why the regulatory framework is there. That's why the vendors we could use for electronic signatures must be very limited and I mean accepted by the authorities that have to watch this. I mean, we definitely need the highest security around this. But once we have it, I'm convinced the security is going to be higher than with the wet ink signature.
Thank you.
Alexei, who do you see in the driver's seat to create these cross-border, how do you say that, cross-border framework? Because for the moment, already there are obviously various vendors on the market, and they rely on the local policies or the European policies like the IFAs. Would it be the legislator who would need to create this supranational standards, or rather the vendors themselves?
I think it would be definitely in the interest of the vendors. I mean, to have either a vendor that could cover globally or to have partnerships with others and try to share kind of certifications that again, to build the trust and that we can rely on each other's solution. The regulator, I'm not sure it's their role to go for that unique solution, but for sure, I mean, if we look at the European level, they gave a common framework. So the framework is there to have a common approach. So let's use this.
That's right. And I think even within this global framework, there are a lot of providers today on the market which are not fully using the possibilities underneath it. And I think that is what we're going to see over the next couple of years still, that a lot more parties in the financial and also other industries switch to see the advantages and switch to the electronic signature process.
I think something Matthias mentioned is very interesting. I mean, we can view this as the blockchain. I mean, what the blockchain is doing could be leveraged for electronic signature. And then we have this trust, this environment which everybody in the chain trusts, So that could be a very good room for investigation and to find a common solution.
Okay, thank you. Conscious of time, I think there's maybe one last question that we would like to ask both of you. It's a little bit general, but still very interesting, hopefully. What is your outlook for the coming years in light of the increased demand for paperless transactions? Do you think that is something that will impose itself, as you mentioned earlier, that through COVID you were forced to accelerate the implementation? Is it something that is here to stay, or is it something where you hopefully, or not hopefully, unhopefully, better said, think that this is something that will disappear again because things are getting too complicated?
No, definitely not something that's going to go away. If I can make a parallel, I mean, when I started in Luxembourg 20 years ago at State Street, I mean, I was processing hundreds of transactions received via signed fax every day, you know, and we never thought it would be possible to automate all of these quickly. And I mean, within a couple of years, we moved pretty much everything from fax to SWIFT, authenticated SWIFT, which is kind of an electronic signature. You know, you put the security between two financial institutions. You have a SWIFT connectivity, which is fully secure. That can be compared to an electronic signature. Then for those asset managers or middle offices of theirs, which did not have a SWIFT capacity, I mean, we built flat file solutions. Again, authenticated lines, security behind. So we did this in a very short period of time. And that's where I'm seeing the parallel with electronic signature. That's where we want to be, and not in 10 years from now. That's what we want, where we want to be in 2 years from now, maybe, and potentially faster than that.
Matthias, do you share that view?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I mean, from our business perspective, I mean, I'm really pushing forward that we will have a digital only policy for all of our business processes in the future. Of course, that needs time. I mean, we are a small company. It's easy for us to implement that. So, I mean, we could just implement DocuSign, within a few weeks. And it's much more complicated for a large bank, for example. And I guess what's necessary for that we as a client of service provider or banks, we need to push them towards these questions and ask them again and again, why are you not implementing these digital processes faster? And I'm pretty sure, for example, at one of our banks, they are when I'm calling, they are already thinking, oh, there comes Mr. Baumann telling us his story about electronic signatures again and again. But that's what we need to do, and the banks have to go to their lawyers, and they have to go to the authorities, and they have to go to the electronic signature service providers. And then my outlook for the future is that I guess within the next years it will be totally normal, just as, I don't know, using WhatsApp or whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Matthias. I think to summarize, like in the interest of time, we are going to stop here. To summarize, I think the electronic signature came to stay, yes. And we will see that much more in the future. I think the permanent pressure of the clients will also move institutions which have been a little bit rigid or blocked by just technical or legislative difficulties to implement or electronic signatures or go fully paperless. We'll see that the market is changing, and we'll see a long time adoption to the electronic signature processes. I think we can benefit from this development through time efficiencies, and which will then ultimately let us cope with more volume and at a less or at a reduced time, and ultimately also reduced cost. Thank you very much, Mr. Matthias and also Alexis, for being available today, for sharing this discussion with us. And we wish you good luck for the future, and stay safe and sound.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Take care.